And the idea of this bank is really to support with the infrastructure funding the main policy objectives of the EU in terms of the needs in energy infrastructure, infrastructure for transport, infrastructure in urban areas and rural areas, but also to support small and medium investments. And we try to make all these investments, we try to make them as to improve the impact on climate change as much as we can, and also take into climate adaptation in these investments. The bank is owned by the currently 28 member states. And yeah, let's see where we are going. And we are one of the largest multilateral lenders in the world. And we do around 400 projects annually. And as I said, the emphasis is very much on big, big, big. So the NCFF for the European Investment Bank is a relatively small facility, and it's also something new for us that we are actually learning on. So as Elena and Nives already said, it's a financial instrument. We are using funding, our own funding, but also funding from the LIFE program, from the European Commission. And we can provide loans, equity, and we have technical assistance to support these kind of projects, because we understand it's relatively innovative to try to finance the type of projects that we are looking at in a way that they can repay the investment. The overall size, as Jelena already said, is 100 to 120 million that we have available for projects. We are targeting 9 to 12 projects, operations, over the entire lifetime. And now, sorry, this is a mistake. The pilot phase of the instrument lasts until 2021. Until that time, we can actually sign operations. Here I'm repeating a bit, but because it's all new, I don't see a problem in that. The objective of this instrument, very broadly speaking, is to invest in projects that either have a positive impact on biodiversity in some way, or use nature-based solutions to adapt to the impacts of climate change. Of course, adaptation can also have positive impacts on biodiversity and vice versa. The setup, as I said, we are looking for projects that can actually generate some revenues to repay the investment, or have some cost savings also to justify the investment. The typical size of an operation that we are looking at, or the investment that we can provide under this facility, is 2 to 15 million. But we cannot finance the entire size of the project. We can only finance up to 75% of the project. So this means you need to find another 25% either from your own budget, or from LIFE funding, or from some other regional funding that is available. The tenor, so the length of the loan that we can provide, is up to 25 years. And we have a grace period of up to 3 years, which means this is the initial time in which the investment doesn't have to repay the loan. We can lend funding to commercial entities, to NGOs, but also to public entities like cities or municipalities. And what is interesting about the facility, we have, as I already said in the beginning, technical assistance available to support the projects in the development, in the implementation, and then also in the monitoring, and also in the reporting on the instrument. And I say a few more words on this facility. As I said, we can support the development of the project. So depending what kind of project it is, with feasibility studies, design studies, understanding, for example, what could be the business model of the instrument, in looking in how a tender to procure the works would need to be specified, in looking at the legislation, in looking at what kind of legal structure, financial structure could suit the project and the objectives you have. And then in the end, to do some monitoring and evaluation of the project. Does the project actually have the the impact that I'm aiming at, and does it achieve those impacts? Yes, please.
Is this during the approved project, or is this help even prior? Is this support meant after you approve the project, or because some of the things might be in the process of developing?
Okay, that's a very good question, actually. So it can be prior to the approval, to our internal approval for the development. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. You know, if you're looking, for example, does this business model or this financial legal model that I have in mind, or maybe I don't have anything in mind and I just need help on that, does it work? So it can be provided before we approve the project. However, it is that we want to be relatively sure that, you know, you're serious in pushing this project forward, and it's not just, oh, I want to do a baseline study on biodiversity here, and maybe I can have some money from the NCFF. It's really, we first want to get the feeling, you know, this, the person we have, or the entity which is opposite to us, is relatively serious in going forward with the project. And then we tend to say we split the technical assistance that we can provide to the project over the different phases. So for the development, then for the implementation, and then also for the monitoring, which is a bit smaller part.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Maybe just to give you an example, to make it a bit more practical, at the moment we are looking at a fund which thinks of investing in the biodiversity of the Mediterranean. And however, they don't know what kind of financial structure would be most suitable to a fund. So we have now hired an external entity to advise them on the different options that would be possible for them. One other point, while speaking about it, that is important, this technical facility, unfortunately we cannot provide that directly to you. So you are the people who have the best expertise on the project, and you have thought about the project for a long time. But this, because it's technical assistance and not a grant, we have to provide it to a third party who advises you and who supports you. And depending on the amount, we have to go through different procurement processes. So everyone, you know, after a certain amount, everyone can apply to support to provide the service to you. Then it's a grant in the way that, you know, it's for free. You don't have to repay it, but it's not a grant that we can give directly to the entity working on the project. And that's a quite important point, because a lot of people suddenly are disappointed because they understand it's not directly provided to them, but to a third party. But often the idea isn't that we are providing support in those areas where the project doesn't have so much expertise, and that's where we are supporting the project. Okay, so what kind of projects can the NCFF finance? And that are really the broad categories, which already Jelena suggested. And I want to go a bit more in depth into these different categories, and speak about some of the projects that we have already signed, and some of the projects that we are still working on. And I have to say, we have signed so far 3 projects. But it takes quite some time to actually develop those projects. And since we have been working around 2 years ago, we are still in the process of speaking to a lot of people who come to us and actually developing the projects. So the first category is green-blue infrastructure, and often we speak about green infrastructure when we look at urban areas or peri-urban areas. So I start out with municipalities and cities. Oops. And what kind of investments we have in mind there. And also, just to give you an idea, we're currently negotiating operations with 2 cities, one in the UK and one in Greece. So in green cities, in cities, you can imagine, for example, green roofs, green walls. Here you see an aerial view of Hamburg, which has actually a green roof strategy. The idea behind this green roof strategy is to mitigate the impacts of more frequent heavy rain events, which their water system cannot absorb anymore. And they had the choice to either increase and enlarge very expensively their water system, their drainage system, or to come up with additional other options to infiltrate those water. For example, through green roofs, which then slows down the process and some water evaporates. And obviously this is a climate adaptation measure, but depending on how you design the green roofs, they also have an impact on biodiversity. Then we are looking at large-scale tree planting in urban areas. Again, that can mean, you can call it an adaptation measure, but it also is a measure which probably has an impact on biodiversity. We are looking sometimes at urban farming, beekeeping. Oops, there's one slide missing. Yeah, no, I jumped over it. Here you see another way of mitigating the impacts of heavy rain events. In Germany, we have just seen this week again. Here you see something that we call sustainable urban drainage system and ponds. I guess those from municipalities and urban areas are familiar with those measures, which help to slow down the runoff of water and help to infiltrate water naturally, which also has a positive impact on the water quality. You can do a couple of measures here. You also have permeable parking spots, which also allow the water to infiltrate naturally rather than in those events of heavy rain to all go immediately into the drainage system and putting too much pressure on these systems. You have these retention basins, again, which hold back the water. I see some of you nodding who are actually probably looking at these kind of measures in your municipality. Forget about this slide for a second. I just want to make two comments on cities or municipalities, how the lending to these entities is possible. Can I just briefly ask who is from a municipality or city in the room? One? Quite a few. Great. So the operations that I mentioned that we are looking to at the moment are two cities who came for us to the bank for a larger loan. They wanted a loan to invest into different areas, into their road system, into their schools, into the refurbishment of public buildings, and so on. And we said we could actually add on the NCFF to this loan. We call these loans framework loans, to invest in those kind of projects that I have just shown, and to integrate, for example, green infrastructure into the redesign of their streets, their parks, and their public infrastructure. So this is one way of doing it, for example, integrating the NCFF into a larger operation that you have with the bank when you invest into your transport, into your energy system, and so on. But we can also provide you with a loan directly for such projects. If you have, for example, something like a green roof strategy, but maybe the cities are smaller in Slovenia, so maybe that's not your case. And then what is eligible is actually to either finance, yes, pure green infrastructure, like invest into parks, into green walls, green roofs, everything I mentioned, or we say you can integrate those measures into the redesigning and of your street, or if you're building new, you integrate those measures into the design and into the planning of your street, and then we can finance the entire investment. For this second option, there needs to be an overarching objective to contribute to biodiversity or adaptation. Then we need to see a general coverage of green, a certain percentage, and different design measures. Are there any questions by the cities, municipalities so far? Probably it also takes some time to digest the information, I guess. So then I'm moving on to a different type of green infrastructure. Green infrastructure is not only possible in urban areas, but also through our landscape. And one project that I like in particular is a former LIFE project that has come to us. They have received funding from LIFE a couple of times, and now they are looking to expand their project. It's called Elia LIFE, which is a transmission operator, the Belgium transmission operator, those who have constructed the transmission lines to transport electricity through the company. And what they have done is they thought these lines under transmission lines normally are clear cut. The vegetation under these lines is clear cut every 3 years. And they came up with different approaches alternative approaches to these clear cut measures, where you really have corridors through the landscape which are really clear cut, and where there's no space anymore for biodiversity. And they have come up with 8 different approaches to manage the vegetation under these transmission lines. They are creating these V shapes to have not such a clear cut in between. And they have found that actually this alternative way of management of these corridors is over the long run cheaper for the transmission line operators than the clear cut that you have every 3 years, because there you have to have a company who manages the maintenance of the lines, and it's quite costly. And this kind of vegetation management actually settles at a certain height after some time, and you do not have such high maintenance cost anymore. So they offer this to transmission line operators, and they need some funding for the initial investment, which is higher than if you just go in and clear cut everything under the line. So that's an example for green infrastructure outside of a city. In terms of adaptation, what we are often looking at is the renaturalization of formerly channelized rivers. Here you have an example from the Emche River in Germany, which was financed by the renaturalization was financed by the bank, and here you see how it looked afterwards. This project is paid by the water utility company, and here there are 2 stretches in Luxembourg up there which are renaturalized, because in Luxembourg we have big problems with the water quality, and we are looking now to renaturalize other stretches of the main river that goes through Luxembourg. And it has impacts on the water quality, positive impacts, and also in terms of adaptation, because we are seeing flooding along the river, which threatens the communities along the river. Now I'm coming to examples that might be more interesting for the smaller entities here, or for the people who work on conservation projects, on park management. Can I just ask who's here from NGO, park management, or okay? 3 to 5. Okay, perfect. So one option that we see to use in the NCFF is actually to combine ecotourism and conservation. So you have some kind of business in a natural environment that in a way depends on an environment that is beautiful, that is intact. And this is why these people are often interested to make also a contribution to the conservation and maintenance of the environment. And we have one project which is called Rewilding Europe, and it's an NGO which set up a special purpose vehicle to take a loan from us. And they have project areas across Europe. They have in total 9 project areas where they have a project manager, and the project manager works with people on the ground. And these people on the ground, a lot of them have some kind of ecotourism business. Up on the top here you see one of these businesses in Portugal, which has a so-called star watching camp. And then there are bed and breakfasts, there are safaris, they're offering different types of activities. And these small businesses pay a small contribution on each overnight stay or on each activity from which they have an income towards the conservation of the area. And this is a model that they apply in all the different areas across Europe. And they have an area in Portugal, in Romania, in Laponia, in Poland. So really it's across Europe. And in other areas they are offering, fishing activities, catch and release. Another project that we are currently looking at combines trail running and conservation. Also they're offering these kind of trail running courses, which then make a contribution again to the conservation of this area. Another model we see is also the combination of sustainable agriculture, as Jelena said before, production of natural products, hazelnuts or almonds, where people look at actually producing these kind of projects in a different way from the traditional way how it has been done for the last decades. And often these different alternative ways have a positive impact on the landscape, to combat erosion, to bring back different species. And also, for example, the investment into natural products, which are now more and more looked after for cosmetics, for medicinal purposes. There are quite a number of companies, brands that are quite up and coming now, which you see in big cities, which are increasingly looking for actually raw material from this type of projects. Yeah, I'm coming to the end. So these are the project examples. Maybe one more remark on, because we are speaking about a financial instrument, I said these kind of projects have to repay the investment, and I spoke a lot about municipalities and cities. In these areas, actually, the repayment is relative traditional. It comes through the taxpayer, or as other investments are repaid as well through the taxpayer's money. And here, for example, while you have a business which is producing something, then I had the example of conservation and ecotourism, where it comes again through a small business which pays back a normal loan. The advantage, for example, for Rewilding Europe Capital, with whom we had this operation, is that we have the guarantee from the Commission, which allowed us to lend to them, because with the kind of risk profile that this company normally has, they would have difficulties to lend on the normal market. And the guarantee that we have from the Commission allows us, the bank, to lend to entities with a higher risk profile, and so we can give them a loan. That's why we can come actually in. We have a website on which you can find a lot of information. It has changed a bit, the outline, so that's an old picture, where we have frequently asked questions, also on the technical assistance, on the different type of projects. So, of course, now is the time to ask questions, but afterwards, when you want to share this or read up on some things, please have a look at our website. And for any questions, or if you would like to present us your project, please contact us through our email address, and then we have a contact form which serves to gather some first information. Because different to, for example, the LIFE program, we do not have set deadlines to which you need to submit. Until 2021, you can send us your project at any time and get into a conversation with us, too much conservation and conversation, with us to see whether this project has actually the potential to get financing from the NCFF. That's, I think, everything from my side. Maybe just, I spoke a lot about direct loans to projects, but what we also do is we lend money, for example, to regional banks, like the Croatian Bank for Development and Reconstruction, HBOR. And the advantage to that is that they can on-lend to smaller banks, And they also know the market much better than we do. They have the regional contacts, and I'm very glad to have Harun Tankovic here to tell you a bit more about our cooperation so far. It's ongoing. We're just setting up a team to support them in identifying those projects in Croatia. And for us, it has been a very good cooperation, and I'm looking forward to hear a bit more from Harun. So this is another option, and also an option for you if you have smaller projects. Well, unfortunately, they only lend to the Croatian market, but then to lend from a regional bank. These are the people from the bank working on the facility that you have for your reference, and that's it. Thank you very, very much for your attention. There are several questions.
Okay, you are talking about a loan, and I'm interested, what is the interest rate?
Yes.
Or do you set it after the project, or? It
really depends. It's not like if you go to your normal local commercial bank for a house loan and everyone knows it's about 1.52%.
Yeah, okay.
It really depends on the profile of each project. And I wouldn't be able to say that now straight away. It really depends on the project, on the history, on whether the project has whether they have done such projects before, or whether it's a completely new entity. So it all depends on a couple of different parameters by which at some point the bank can then determine the interest rate.
It is the same for equity, or?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation, but I would like if you could maybe elaborate a bit more the 3 projects that have been already approved, to tell people, that they get a feeling of the contents of the projects maybe. And I would like as well if you could give us a little bit more details on what does it make it so difficult to approve such a project, because we saw that the facility is there from 2015, but till now only 3 projects have been approved. So I know that there was a lot of time spent to elaborate the facility, to have all the cooperation between the Commission and the bank there, but still, I know that there were like 7 or 9 projects in the pipeline, if I'm not wrong, so more than they were approved. So what are the main challenges when a project proposal comes to you, and then during the negotiations then to approve at the end the project?
Okay, you put me on the spot here. So the 3 projects. One is Rewilding Europe Capital, of which I spoke, the combination of mainly ecotourism, production of natural products, fishing, some kind of hunting, mainly ecotourism, production of cheese, honey, lavender, and so on, in combination with ecotourism. That's the first. I recommend to have a look at the website, because I think their model is quite replicable. The second is our contribution to a forestry fund in Ireland. What this fund does, so we cannot invest directly in equity, but we can contribute to funds with up to 30% of the total volume of the fund. So for a fund, also it takes very long to find investors who are willing to invest, also if it's not, a plain forward fund. This forestry fund is different in comparison to other funds that are working in Ireland, in that it applies a so-called continuous coverage forestry approach, which I think in continental Europe is much more common, which means you do not cut when the forest has reached a certain height, you do not cut the entire forest at once, but you have an approach where you just take out single individual trees to allow the forest to grow more naturally. And so far, the approach in Ireland has really been they grow the forest for 15, 20 years, and then they cut the entire forest. That's in the project in Ireland. And then the third project is with the Croatian Bank for Redevelopment and for Development and Reconstruction, which we have signed. Your second question. There are a number of reasons. First of all, it takes some time to set up such a facility in the bank. Second, as I already said, a bit of self-criticism. It's a facility that is very different to what the bank normally does, investing in large infrastructure. So even for us, it's a bit of a change of mind. So if you come with such a project to our risk department, they say, what is this little ecotourism business that you, with no history, that you want to invest in? So it's a bit of a mind change inside the bank that is required, but also outside of the bank, where we see that a lot of NGOs and projects that come to us have more often, NGO hat on, but they are not so much used to thinking in terms of how can I actually set up a project which is sustainable in its financing and it can refinance itself. And this is really something where we need to change the mindset. People come with us with suggestions for certification schemes, for doing baseline studies, and well, that's all very, very nice, but you need to find a way to combine these things, plus setting the projects on an independent financial footing. And then, well, often these projects are, well, they have very little background and experience, and this is also a bit of a problem for us to set this up as a project. So there's a variety of reasons, and yeah.
Thank you. I would have an additional question. Sorry, but just to use the opportunity when you are here. For instance, the project that you mentioned that invested in ecotourism.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
If an entity comes to you and says, okay, we want to have this ecotourism resort, and they present to you a project on ecotourism, but would you take a look as well, not only on the financial side, but as well on how much biodiversity would be saved through that project? Would that be an indicator as well? So if you would ask the project applicant to tell you how much of the biodiversity will be preserved with the project? Yeah, would you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is normally what the projects that come to us are quite good at. They can explain to us very well, you know, what they want to do in terms of biodiversity, in terms of adaptation. That is not the main hurdle. And then we would also do some baseline studies with them looking at the project. Definitely we look at that, and we have different experts for different areas. We have experts in the water sector, in agriculture, and depending what type of project it is, I work with people in those sectors because I don't have the expertise. So we do look at that, but often this is not the point where the project has difficulties.
Okay, thank you. I will leave now for others to ask additional questions.
Hello, my name is Matej from Permaculture Institute, Maribor. We're dealing in regeneration of natural systems. And I have a question about return on investment. What's the minimum time in that you support the project?
The minimum time?
Yeah, how many years it has to be?
Well, that's that's in which you have to repay the loan. It's difficult to say. It varies from project to project. But the repayment of the entire loan can be up to 25 years.
Thank you.
there's one other question up there, and then.
Hello, thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. I would like to ask a question, if you could elaborate more on, you had 3 types of funding or loans that you are offering on the 3rd one. Can you go to the slide where it shows?
On the 3rd slide you're saying?
Yeah, I think it's very beginning.
Sorry.
This, yes.
Yeah.
So this, or 2nd and 3rd one. So first is loan. Okay, this is understood from the viewpoint of the bank. But what about the fund and tenor? Can you elaborate more? Have you had projects on that or no?
So loan, direct or indirect. Direct would be directly to your project. Intermediate is through a bank, through a regional or local bank, or actually Rewilding Europe, the project I was talking to. They are also intermediating because they are on lending to the smaller projects in the regions, to the small entities, and then the fund is a big entity that again is investing into smaller projects, and that is equity. Equity that we are investing in those funds. And then the tenor, that means the time over which the loan has to be repaid. So if you're taking a loan mortgage from your local bank to finance your house or your apartment, that's also something often 15 or 20 years. So that's the time you have to pay back the investment. Isn't that clearer?
Yeah, well, kako? Ja. To je, ampak. Okay. So basically there are only loans, no funds, direct funds available?
No, it's only repayable financing. And then 100%
repayable?
100% repayable? No, it's good to ask. Maybe there's something. There's the technical assistance, but as I said, and this doesn't need to be repaid. But it goes to a third party who would help you to design to design your project, to give you some advice on some particular points. And this money doesn't have to be repaid.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes? No, that's absolutely fine.
I would just like to ask more about the application form, because I've seen the first application.
The contact form?
Yes, yeah. It's very general. And could you maybe tell more about the process? How it is there an interview or about the application?
Yeah. So what we normally do, for example, if we have first information via this contact form, we set up a meeting, a phone call or video call with the entity that submitted the information, and then we are trying to understand really how far the project is developed, how far it's evolved. Do you have already a relative good idea what the project consists in? How you could repay the investment? Do you have some understanding of whether there's a demand for what you're offering? And so it's more this first conversation is very much to see whether you have thought the project a bit through, and then we are interested to understand a bit more on how you came to the different to the costings. For example, you say you need 2 million. We do not want a clear, cut of every cost, but we want to see that you have thought about it, because you wouldn't believe it, but there are just some people who are saying, okay, between 2 and 50 million, then I put 7 million, and then you ask, well, how do you get to this? But it happens quite a lot, so we want to have a basic breakdown, and we want to see, and also that you have the capacity that it's not just you, which would be nice, but you know, that you have a couple of people that you're working with, a system that supports you. And then really it's very, for such a bank, I'm myself often sometimes surprised, it's a relatively informal process in which we advance and ask for more information on the project that you have. And then we have internal stages. We have to again check with the Commission, is it eligible? That's where the biodiversity adaptation component comes in. They double check, yes, this is a project that could potentially have a positive impact. And then for us, a big stage is where we go to our management committee and propose in the project, and they sign it off and say, yes, fine.
There's also one part where we have to define who is the third party that is going to invest in the project. This can be EU funds or private funds. Is it necessary that we already have this, or we can speculate according to strategies where we can find additional funds?
Exactly. What we want to see again is that you thought about it, that you have done your homework, done a bit of research. What could be the other funds?
The options.
Options. Okay. Rewilding Europe, for example, they don't have other EC funding, but they have funding from the Dutch lottery. They have some support from WWF in the Netherlands and another foundation. So that you, for example, that you spoke with some foundations or these kind of entities, and that there is some kind of initial interest from their side, for example, for the production of natural products. If ideally you have an off-taker agreement with some kind of company who says, yes, if you produce this, we would be interested to, or at least the start.
Because, for example, we have strategy of rural development, and in this strategy there are some things that they say we want to go this way, and it's very possible that we get funding from there also for this project. So is this enough?
Yes, okay. Then over the phase of the project development, you also need to develop on getting those funds. Before we actually reimburse any funding to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I don't know how much time we have left. It's fine?
Yeah, enough.
Oh, okay, wow. That's...
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Aleš. I'm from municipality of Kamnik, which is on the northern part of Slovenia. If I'm correct, you have also an office in Ljubljana, European Investment Bank, because there were some people.
Could be. I'm looking to Arun. Do you know anything? So sorry, I don't know exactly where we have.
Because my question was if we contact directly through the office in Ljubljana or directly with this application form. We have big problems with flooding because we're under Alps, so there are some...
You're under what? Sorry.
Under Alps.
Okay, yeah.
So there are many rivers which are causing flooding.
Yeah.
Especially now, in this week, we have twice this kind of problems, yes, and we are looking to give rivers some more space.
Some more space, yes.
Yeah.
That definitely would be the typical eligible project, very interesting. And if there is some also, if you're from the municipality, you're thinking into the direction of applying some, giving some more space to the river, as you say, which we call a nature-based solution, this very abstract term.
We are in this project, we are in contact also with the other municipality, Domžale, and also with Ministry of Environment.
Okay.
So if
that would
these three parts also can combine financing.
That's actually ideal if you have some other funding from the ministry, from the commission, and then from us. So if you give us some information through the contact form or through an initial call with us, in this case I would include colleagues from the water sector, to get a better understanding of the project, the timelines, the investment volume, what you're planning to do. That would be very interesting to us. Happy to, as you feel more comfortable, either have a call with colleagues or provide some first information through the contact form.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
I don't have a question, but I'm from the village that got flooded, and
Good, great. Germany as well a lot.
Can I still ask additional question in relation to this one? So how could you then, prove that this how could you get funds from, installing these green, nature-based solutions? These are obviously saving costs, but it's not like you could then charge people who are no longer flooded for, their protection. I don't see the revenue generating projects here. Idea behind.
No, you're not behind at all. Actually, it's more traditional than you think. What you need is a municipality who actually believes that applying nature-based solutions or giving more space to the river is the right thing to do, rather than building concrete right and left. And they invest in it, believing firmly that these kind of investments will save or will prevent or at least mitigate floodings that will happen in the future. And for that, of course, I assume they would do some different type of studies on flowing path and so on hydrological conditions, for which actually the technical assistance could come into the project and could be used. But you need a municipality who's convinced that this kind of project will save them money in the future. And
I'm
then they
still
repay.
interested in how the repayment of loan would happen, because actually the Ministry of the Environment has its whole plan on fighting floods or flood defense measures is based on nature-based measures. It's all about that, because basically Slovenia is a small country. We don't have that. We need to provide more space, and there are many municipalities and projects in this foreseen for this type, but I don't see how the revenue generating would happen from this type of project. Yeah. Is there, do you, I don't know, put up a park and then charge visitors, but you don't get, millions out of this.
Neves wants to answer this.
I just wanted to maybe help a little bit, but I'm not really familiar with flooding policy, but if I understand correctly, you mentioned before that the project has to prove that it would save some losses. I can understand this, that, in case a flooding would occur, there would be costs to the municipality and to the state. So in order to prevent those costs, one would get the loan and implement the measures that would prevent the flooding, and that would be paid from the taxpayers' money that would in any case pay the damage that would be there in case of flooding. But I wanted to ask you, because I know for the other loans that Slovenia took from the bank, that it usually has to be a state guarantee for that. But in that case, the government or the state was the loan taker. But in the case of municipality, if the municipality takes the loan, would you still require a state guarantee?
No, here would be directly to the municipality without the guarantee. Yeah. Okay,
so I think that the repayment of the loan comes from the tax.
From the municipal budget, exactly. Yeah, I think you explained. She explained much better, right?
No, because in any case it would be a cost of taxpayers.
Yeah. Okay. And often, while you assume and you do some studies, you think that actually this investment costs you less than the number of damages you'll have with over years with increasing number of this type of floods. And we can do some, what we do now often for the projects, we also for our mainstream projects in the bank, we look at the climate risks, we do an assessment of risks for these projects. You're still shaking your head. I know. I think I know why. Because there's a lot of talking about more innovative ways of paying. For example, not through the municipal budget, but through involving insurances, through involving communities downstream, and trying to find, well, what we call a more innovative way of financing it. But I haven't seen a project yet, to be very honest, that came with a good model to me to say, the insurance that came and say we want to finance it. Maybe Jelena has more concrete evidence. There's a lot of theoretical talk about this, but the project that comes to me with this more innovative angle, I'm happy to look at it. But
I can just confirm. I mean, it's generate revenue or avoid damage. Here, I think it's avoid damage. I've not seen. I think there is a lot of effort to involve insurance, but this, I'm also kind of on your side there. We haven't seen enough concrete evidence that we could have a project that generate revenue. You could look, you start off from the premise, okay, we need to avoid damages. Then what can we do? We can do a flood event that is concrete, or we can make more space for the river. And then you have to compare between the two. Which one will be more cost effective? I don't know, there's no revenue, I mean, unless you charge $1 million for the park.
More questions?
No? Good. Well, I think no more questions. Well, thank you all, and maybe also I'm around, obviously, in the lunch break and coffee break, and happy to discuss further, and maybe you have more ideas actually, or seen a project, and I'm very happy to just discuss further and provide more information
Okay,
if
so
possible.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for this very interesting. Because we are a bit ahead of time, we have 15 minutes if you would like to still grab some coffee, stretch your legs, or you want us to continue and then to have a break before the lunch, because we are a little bit quicker than according to the program. So if you want to grab, there's still coffee outside, and come back 15 after 11. Thank you.